Wonderful. So, as we heard the chant, we're going to spend some time together on Friday mornings looking at the Paramis. And by way of introduction, I'll just try and talk a little bit about what they are. And then hopefully we can talk a little bit about why we've chosen to look at them and study them, and end with a brief practice exercise or invitation. So, the Buddha says, just like the great ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so this Dhamma and discipline has one taste, the taste of freedom. And just like, that's the Buddha's quote. I'll end the quote. Now it's Ayya Ahimsa talking. And then he does illustrate many ways that the Dhamma discipline is like this great ocean. And one way Sanghamita has talked a lot in the group about is it's slanting and sloping, this idea of the gradual training. And for basically everyone, our progress on the path, our progress in the Dhamma is gradual. It's bit by bit, one step at a time, drip by drip, one drop at a time. And another way that the Dhamma discipline, the Dhamma is the teachings of the Buddha, and the discipline is the viriya, the code of rules that people that become monks or nuns follow. So that's the Dhamma and the discipline. Another way that it's like the ocean is that it's just so vast and deep. Another way it's like the ocean is that there are so many entry points. And that's where I'm linking it to the Paramis. So the Paramis is one entry point. The Buddha taught the Dhamma, and he was the consummate teacher. And he was the consummate teacher because he knew the hearts and the minds of the person that he was sharing the teachings with. So it was perfect for them. But he was also just perfect, a consummate teacher. He used all these pedagogical methods. And one of the methods that he used was to clump things, into clusters, into themes, into lists. And I think anyone that begins to approach the Buddha's teachings sometimes will get very overwhelmed with the lists. They go on and on and on. But there's really main lists, like the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path, and the 7 Factors of Awakening and the 5 Hindrances. So the Paramis is another list, but actually it's not a list that the Buddha personally gave to us. It's a list that's been compiled a little bit later, after his death. It seems like many of his disciples were and scholars and people were like, wow, a Tathagata arises in the world. Tathagata arises in the world is the very beginning of the gradual path. That's the fact that we live in a time when there was a Buddha, and the teachings of the Buddha is still available to us. And people are like, that was so amazing. He was so amazing. How did that happen? And that's where the list of the Paramis comes from. It's in Theravada Buddhism, the Buddhism that we're basically practicing in. There's 10 on the list of the Paramis. In Mahayana Buddhism, that covers Zen and Tibetan, Vajrayana, there's actually just 6. But you can they're very, very overlap, and the 4 that aren't in the 6 in Mahayana, you can kind of see how they fit in the subsets of the 10 we will be looking at. So there's 10 in Theravada Buddhism. And just probably an overview for many people and maybe not for others. And I'm doing this because this is the way my mind tends to work. I do very well with frameworks and with structure. And so just to put it in the big picture, Theravada Buddhism is a branch of Buddhism, and there were many, very soon after the Buddha lived. There were like 16, 18, and Theravada is one of the ones that has survived, stayed intact. And the scriptures in Theravada Buddhism are called the Pali Canon. And the word canon is not unique to Buddhism. It's any organization that has this code of beliefs, codes of teachings, codes of rules of conduct. This is the idea of canonizing, canon. And Pali is a language. And so the scriptures of Theravada Buddhism are recorded in the Pali language, and it's kind of it's a simplified Sanskrit. So that's why it's called the Pali Canon. And there are 3 main sections in the Pali Canon, and they are called baskets. Baskets that are holding the teachings, the 3 baskets. And in Pali, it's the Tipitaka. 3 basket, tas 3, Pitaka's basket. And so one of the baskets is the sutta basket. Another basket is the viriya basket. That's the discipline, the rules of conduct. And the third is the adhitthāna basket. And most of what we look at on Tuesdays and on Fridays is from the sutta basket, sutta discourse. Actually, beautiful, sutta, beautiful word. It's linked to hearing, and it's linked to thread. This idea of these pearls of teachings that the Buddha gave us, and we make this beautiful necklace. So there's 5 sections of the sutta basket. So we have these 3 baskets. Now we're in one of the baskets, and there's 5 sections in that basket, and they're the nikayas. We use this word nikaya a lot, and that just means collect. Again, that's a Pali word. It just means collection. So there, and this all happened after the Buddha. It was like all of these discourses, all of these lessons, these sermons, these teachings that the Buddha gave were. The majority of them were remembered by Ananda, and Ananda was the Buddha's personal attendant for many years. And Ananda had even asked the Buddha, if you have this conversation with someone else and I don't happen to be there, I mean, typically he was there, please tell me, later. And so after the Buddha passed away, Ananda was still alive, and he recited all these teachings that he remembered hearing, and then that continued to be remembered. And about 200, 300, 400 years later, they were all written down. And there are still monks. I don't know of any females. There are still monks that actually can recite a Pali Canon, which is like seriously, like we're talking about, we're talking about 5 volumes that are, so yeah, it's not like the Bible. It's, it's about this much. Like, I haven't even read it all. There's recite it like this. Anyway. So these five Nikayas, these five collections. And I'll stop there. That's enough information, but we can refer to these five again at another time, like how they were collected. And so the Paramis are in the fifth collection, the last one that was put together, and it's a little bit of a hodgepodge because it was at the very end, all the, oh, we forgot that, oh, that's really important, and it's in the Khuddaka Nikaya, and Khuddha means small or minor. So, and often we don't actually talk about the Khuddaka Nikaya. We do, but we don't realize we're talking about it. So like the Dhammapada, the Mettā Sutta, many of the things we chant, the Mangala Sutta, the Ratana Sutta, the Therigatha, the Adhitthāna. So often when we're talking about a teaching that's from the Khuddaka Nikaya, we're actually just talking about the part of the Khuddaka, the Sutta Nipada. So many of you probably heard some of those, like the Mettā and the Sutta Nipada, Dhammapada is the person. Dhammapada, the Dhammapada is in the Khuddaka Nikaya. Yeah, I just did that because it helps me, and I probably won't do that long again. But if anyone wants to have a refresher or know where something hangs, please ask. It's helpful for me to have a big picture. So the Paramis were collected after the Buddha had passed away by some of the main disciples, and they are 10 characteristics, quality of mind, quality of heart, that the followers of the Buddha realized he had developed to perfection. And we will not develop them to perfection. That if you do, it takes a long time, eons, and you're headed towards Buddhahood. But it's clear that these are 10 things that are incredibly important in our spiritual lives, and things that we can begin to consciously cultivate. So they're qualities of mind and heart, qualities of character. And the 10 are, I'll say the Pali and then I'll say the English. So the 10 are dana, which is generosity. And then sīla, which is morality or ethics. And then nekkhamma is the Pali, and that is renunciation. So the first three are generosity, morality, and renunciation. And then pañña is the Pali, and that's wisdom. And then viriya is the Pali, and that is energy. And then khanti is the Pali, and it's patience. The next three are wisdom and some energy and patience. And then it's sacca, which is truth. And then it's adhitthāna, which is determination or resolve. And then to everyone who know, mettā, being just benevolence, well-wishing, and finally upekkhā, equanimity, balance. So those are the 10. And so the reason we've picked this is on Tuesdays, we're going to be looking at things that are very, very directed towards our time on the cushion, our meditation practice. And the Paramis balance that. They're really things that we can ways that we can be consciously working with our own minds and orienting our minds off the cushion. So it's for people that are coming to both, hopefully it's a nice compliment. And we're going to use as our jumping off point this book, Paramis. This is by Ajahn Sucitto. He was one of the very, very early monks at Amaravati with Ajahn Sucitto in England, and lived most of it. He's still alive and he's still teaching a lot. He's probably got more talks on Dhamma Seed. Does everyone know Dhamma Seed? This is a website that has so many Dhamma talks, like thousands. DhammaSeed.org. Anyway, if you just do Dhamma Seed, you get there. And so Ajahn Sucitto has spent the most of his monastic life at Chithurst Monastery. And Christine, who was here in the summer when Ayya Brahmavara was here, Christine was an anagarika there for 3 years, I think. Loved Chithurst. Yeah. So Chithurst is like sister monastery with Amaravati. And people go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But Ajahn Sucitto was the abbot at Chithurst, for like 30 years, long time. And this book is for free distribution. So we have copies, and Sarah will bring you one when we come in a couple weeks, and it's available online. If you just put in Paramis by Ajahn Sucitto, you get to it. And go to when I Googled it, it was the second one, but everyone's Google's a bit different. But if you go to the Amaravati site, you get to the book, and then at some point on the page, there's a place to choose the PDF.
Did I spell it right? Sucitto.
No, S-U-C, sorry. So his name is spelled S-U-C-I-T-T-O. So Su means good, like dukkha, sukha. Su is good, and chitta is mind, heart. So good heart, good mind. Very true. But Ajahn Sucitto. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Great. So why to study these beautiful 10 qualities? I will say one more thing, and that is Paramis often gets translated as perfection, and it was perfect in the Buddha's life as a bodhisattva and then as a Buddha. You can also translate it as highest. This is part of the higher mind. I'm pretty sure that the English word paramount comes from this Pali. Some of our words in English come from Sanskrit roots, some from Latin, some from Sanskrit roots. So I think paramount is the same etymology. I just run over that word. I can't really say it. Yeah. Okay. So why are we studying this? It's we're hoping that it's very, very practical. That and we'll spend a week or two. Depends how juicy, how applicable, how rich it is for people on each parami. We actually need to be spending our whole lives on each parami, but for our Friday class, we'll be spending a week or two. So these are not things that we'll be doing like in addition. Oh, one more thing to do, like my feeble 10 push-ups that I do every day, female women's push-ups. We're not meaning for it to be that, like, oh, another thing, I'm supposed to do. It's more things that we do as we're doing. It's a way to orient our attitudes, orient our thinking, orient our attention as we're doing the things we already all do every day. So it's meant to be very, very practical. And so trying to move into that practicality, I won't actually unpack any of the 10 this week. I'm just sort of covering what Ajahn Sucitto says in his introduction in the first chapter, which I'm actually not sure what he called it. Crossing the floods. Yeah, crossing the floods. So he goes into he goes a big tangent that's beautiful and lovely framework, but I won't get into today. But at the end of the chapter, he's talking about basically something that we could talk about for months. It's one of the most important things in our practice, and it's really both a precursor for developing the paramis, and it's a feedback loop. It's an essential foundation, starting point, but then it's all throughout. And that is wise attention. So I'll just spend a couple minutes on that, and then we can open it up for discussion and questions. So wise attention. Attention is something that is just there all the time, like breathing. There's always something that our consciousness is attending to. There's always something being known, always. So the Buddha gives us this very powerful framework of either we're orienting our attention wisely or unwisely. And this is sort of the linchpin of our practice. And anytime that we are attending to something with any kind of wisdom, we are being our own best friend. We're on the path. We're totally on the path. The path starts, and the whole path is built by wise attention. There's a really, really important sutta in one of the collections, the middle length collection, the Majjhima Nikaya, and that collection is put together because these sermons are kind of the same length. They're not super long and they're not super short. So the Majjhima Nikaya, there's a very important conversation. It's either, I think it's Majjhima Nikaya 43, and someone's having a conversation with Sariputta and asks Sariputta, how does right view arise? What are the prerequisites for right view? What are the conditions for right view? What do I need to be doing to have right view arise? And right view it's the beginning and the end of the path. And Sariputta says two things. One is wise attention, and the second is the voice of another. It's one of my favorite passages in the whole Pali Canon. These two things, right? Wise attention and the voice of another. And so the wise attention piece is the part that we have some volition in, second to second. And then the voice of another is really all of the teachings that we get about good company, you know, and having wise friendship. And we all have this experience of, you know, I think many people that are trying to develop a meditation practice and trying to follow the Buddha's teachings, I can speak very personally. Because I'm a nun, I live in a monastery, you know, and then, so I think, you know, doing okay. And then I go to be with my family. And see, this is where you just really have that experience of the difference between being with people that are trying to cultivate the same kinds of qualities that we are, and people that are not at this point in their lives. So I'm just using this to say that this is how easily our minds are influenced. You know, when I'm in a household that is chaotic and a TV is on, and I mean, it's amazing, but I'm just somehow not as mindful. And so that, you know, this is a very coarse example of good friendship, the voice of another, and ultimately, the voice of another. You know, this is the thing that's so amazing about the Buddha. He did not have the voice of another. The Buddha penetrated to understand reality on his own with no instruction. I mean, he did the whole thing by himself, but none of us can. We need the voice of another, starting with the Buddha's voice, but then also just eventually we all do need a teacher, because we just do. And so these two things, voice of another and wise attention. So that was a bit of a tangent on voice of another, but just to flesh it out. So wise attention. So we always are attending to something. And so the wisdom piece is, how are we attending? What are we feeding? You know, I'm sure many of you, I'm thinking perhaps you've heard this absolutely stunning, beautiful wisdom teaching from First Nations. The grandfather and the grandson. The grandfather says to the grandson, "Grandson, I inside I have two wolves." Do people know this? It's the most beautiful story. And the grandson says, "Oh, and oh, you know," and grandfather's like, "Yes, I have two wolves. One is wholesome, and one is unwholesome. One is good, and one is evil. And they fight." And the grandson says, "Oh my gosh, you know, who's going to win?" And the grandfather, whichever one I feed. And so this is the wise attention. So Ajahn Sucitto, I do encourage us to read, just read the ends of the chapters, because he gives some really beautiful, very doable instructions. And these ends of the chapter are called, okay, so this particular one, if we have the physical book, it's on page 25, and it's quotes and suggestions on heedfulness. So Ajahn Sucitto actually pairs heedfulness and wise attention. It's only 3 pages, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I found it very, very doable and practical. So he's really talking about us inserting these pauses into our lives, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. And this is where we can start to consciously, very deliberately bring wise attention. Sanghamita's often shared this holding technique. That's a perfect example of wise attention. But we're doing this holding technique when things are really escalated and there's something pretty intense. So this is the same idea of ways to build in wise attention into our life, that just our regular life. And so Ajahn Sucitto is giving examples like, just before you eat your breakfast, just pause 5 seconds, 10 seconds. What's in the mind? How's the mind? What color is the mind? How am I? Just, and he says not even to answer the question, just to float it through consciousness. Just to, so, and you can pick times like when, just when you get into your car, or when you're putting on your coat, or, things that you do regularly. Just build in these 10-second pauses where you just take a couple breaths and check the heart, check the mind, check the body. So I'm going to end there and open it up. If anyone wants to ask a question or make a comment or get some clarification. Great, I'm so clear. Excellent. Yes.
So just in regards to the Paramis and the 10, are they in any kind of order, in hierarchy, or does one together? And
Such a good question. The question I asked Sanghamitta yesterday.
oh, good.
Yeah. I've looked, in Theravada Buddhism, they are in this order, the ones that I said. And it's clear to me, it's very clear to me that, dana is the entry point to, it's what the Buddha talked about always. Even if somebody was not fully practicing, they weren't meditating, he was always began by teaching them about generosity. So, and that's the first. And the last is upekkhā, equanimity, and it's the last of the 7 factors of awakening. It's the last of the Brahma Viharas, the divine abidings, the 4 cultivations of heart and mind that the Buddha has taught us. So that suggests to me that there is some kind of, and I will say, and this was really helpful for me, that Sanghamitta was talking about, that when the Buddha's given a list, for sure they're in a special order, for sure. This is a list that's been compiled not by, this has not been given to us directly by the Buddha. So, it does seem like to me there's an entry and that there's a culmination, but trying to look at the order, Lori, I was surprised. I think those first 3, dana, and then morality, and then renunciation, that those I get are like foundational beginning, necessary for anything that's really got a lot of insight and penetration and stillness in it. So, but then the next one's wisdom, and very often wisdom is toward the end of these lists. It's the end of the 5 factors, which are very important. And we'll talk about it at some point. Really important in meditation to bring these 5 factors into balance. So Sangamitta's point was like, that we could look at that wisdom parami similar to right view at the beginning of the Eightfold Path, that you have to have. So I don't think that it's the 4th parami. I don't think that that's the, knowledge of liberation. I think that's mundane right view. Like that's enough wisdom to know I need to clean up my act. I need to calm my crazy mind. I need to get some wisdom teachings into my life. Yeah.
Just being able to discern, is this wholesome or unwholesome?
Yeah, that.
So, so a more basic level of wisdom rather than the wisdom of awakening, enlightenment. And then I'd like you to share, I'm just going to share the screen. You had some very interesting comments from Beth Upton on adhitthāna. And it's interesting, this chant that we did that was from Birkin, adhitthāna, which is determination. So I'm going to just count.
Now this is in a very different.
Yeah, it's a very different
slightly
order.
different. The
1,
first
2,
3.
3.
This is
4,
this
5,
is
6.
the order. This is the order. It's
7.
the chant in your book. It's in a different order. This is the same order.
Okay.
This is the same order. This is the order I'm used to seeing it in Theravada.
So it's interesting. Adhitthāna, determination, is near the end of the list, and so can you share your comments from Beth Upton that you shared with me, because that was, I thought, very, very good.
Yeah, that was really cool. I was sharing with Sangamitta, I've done 2 month-long retreats with Beth Upton, this meditation teacher that we think is so good at teaching meditation, like very precise, it's very clear. She knows exactly where you are and can help you progress. It's the clarity and the precision that I've not experienced that level before. Anyway, so the very first retreat I did with her was in March in Austin, Texas. And it just happened, it didn't come up in this Quebec retreat that the 2 of us did. But there were a handful of people that were getting farther in their meditation, where they were beginning to have a nimitta, a sign of concentration, which if your meditation object is the breath, that nimitta invariably will be a light, and it's a light that's in the mind. It's basically that the hindrances have calmed down enough that there's just this purity, a purity of mind, and the meditator will experience seeing. You're not seeing, your eyes are closed, but you experience a light. It doesn't even need to be bright, and it doesn't even need to be big. It just, the most important thing is that it's steady. But what was really interesting, I'd never heard this, and then when Beth Upton said it, it made so much sense to me. Once someone had that, and that light was present while they were meditating for many, many meditation sessions, like we were in a retreat, but over days, then Beth would give them instructions to change their, the other thing was that this light would then come to a place where the person was experiencing the light very much in the same place that they were experiencing the breath, wherever that is. And then Beth would give instructions for beginning to switch the focus in the meditation, the attention in the meditation, from the breath. That the breath has been your primary thing that you've been paying attention to, and that's why things have gotten steady and stable, and this light has come. So you take the breath and move it from the foreground to the background, and you bring the light to the foreground. And then when you can do that for for a time, then Beth would give instructions to set an adhitthāna. And I've heard of this, but I'd never seen it, like really specifically someone doing it and being given instructions about it. And often it would be like for 10 minutes or 15 minutes that I will, may the attention be with the nimitta for 10 minutes. And then Beth would say, forget it, and just meditate. And then invariably the person would then, come out of that experience, and it would be whatever they said, 14 minutes, 17 minutes. And so this is the idea of being able to go into jhana and then come out at determined time. This is adhitthāna. So that's adhitthāna when the hindrances are really, really subdued and the mind is very pure. Outside of that situation, Beth was saying, don't do time adhitthānas. And this was very helpful for people that had done Goenka retreats and that sort of thing. When you do a time adhitthāna, when the mind is not pure enough, it's not helpful, because then you get into willpower and striving and the ego and then you sometimes you can get tense, and then this is not helpful. So there was another woman that had, and this is actually why she was explaining this. This other woman had set this 3-hour adhitthāna and had actually had that experience. They were with the breath the entire 3 hours. They were like, I don't think I missed a breath, but it wasn't a very good meditation. Like the quality wasn't very good. So Beth was explaining, before you're like about to go into jhana and the mind is quite purified, your adhitthāna should not be like a time adhitthāna. It should be about quality, not about quantity. So things like when there's the urge to just stop, think about getting up and getting a cup of tea, have an adhitthāna, that I'll just pause and investigate that and see if I can encourage the mind to be with the meditation object for a little bit longer. Or adhitthānas like, I will try to enjoy the breath and find ways to enjoy the breath. Thank you.
Okay, we're at 10 o'clock, so we'll do our closing. Today it's on equanimity, upekkhā, one of the paramis. So first of all, if you can bring to mind a neutral person in your life, somebody you don't have strong feelings of love or aversion towards, and direct these phrases towards them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depend upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. Now bring to mind somebody who's been very supportive of you. Send the phrases to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depend upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. Now bring to mind a friend. So if the previous person was a friend, then think of another friend and the phrases to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depend upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. Now bring to mind somebody that you have a difficult relationship with. Send the praises to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depend upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you too as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you too true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. And now we send the praises to ourselves. I am the owner of my karma. My happiness and unhappiness depend on my actions, not my wishes or hopes. I care for myself, and I am determined to follow the path of peace, the Noble Eightfold Path. I wish myself happiness, and I am determined to make skillful choices. All beings are owners of their karma. The happiness and unhappiness of all beings depends upon their actions, not upon my wishes for them. I care for all beings, suffering beings, but I cannot keep them from suffering. I wish all beings true happiness, but I cannot make their choices for them. May the merit of our practice be shared with all beings, named and unnamed. Please, Claire, Agnes, Tim, Ruth, Stella, Eric. May all beings be well and happy. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice time with your families if you're getting together over Christmas. We'll be back on Tuesday, which is just after Boxing Day, I guess. That's Susan.
Thank you.
Susan, yeah, and Jonathan.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. So how long did your son